obviously in Vancouver today, it's a big topic. The Leafs are here. They're once a year. It's a big deal. And so they're comparing the Leafs rebuild. And there's some people here that think, the only thing the Leafs have done right is win the lottery and get Tavares. And I've been on a couple of times today and talking about the one thing that has set the Leafs apart, really, for me, is that, the Shana-plan, which people like to make fun of the name, but the Shana-plan basically was an idea that they have followed, and they haven't strayed from that vision. Sure, it got spiced up. They got a couple of juicy meatballs with Matthews winning the lottery and getting Tavares to come and sign. But they haven't deviated from what their plan was. Look at the guys they got over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years that are all part of this thing. They got Zach Hyman for McKagan, a 7th rounder. They got Trevor Moore for nothing. They got Janssen for a 7th-round pick. Like, they just started pumping after these prospects, and they never deviated. In Vancouver and in Edmonton, in my opinion, it's kind of the same thing, is they've kind of jockeyed back and forth between two different ideas. And that never works. Like, hell, think of it in your day. If you've got two different ideas when you're driving in your car, you're like, I don't even know where to go. I don't know which one to go to first. And the Canucks they were trying to be a playoff team, and they were trying to build at the same time. That doesn't work.
Yep.
And Edmonton, they've smashed that thing up, for a decade, and now they've got to re-dig out of it again. There's no way Edmonton should be in the position they're in.
No way.
Well, you know what? It's interesting, right? Just hearing you talk about that, it just dawned on me that maybe the greatest accomplishment this Shana-plan, era has really achieved is reprogramming the city and the talking points. And the best example is what's going on right now. You've got Travis Dermott, who's out and week to week. Jake Gardiner, who's out week to week. If you took those two equivalent players out of the lineup 5 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we would be talking every single day, when is Rasmus Sandin coming up? Give him a chance. He looks good. He's 18. He's playing minutes.
That first-round pick, you got to get him up.
It hasn't come up once. Not one person in the city has mentioned it. And that might be the greatest accomplishment. They've reprogrammed the whole city, Ray. The whole city.
And but Brian, it goes right back. And just think of how long it's taken, right? So the first part of that whole thing was that Shanahan had to get the board to believe, which I can't imagine is very easy, but to get those guys to believe this was the right way. Then when they hire Babcock, remember his first statement, there's going to be pain. That first year, they lowered the bar. Remember, we were joking about it.
Right.
Man, they've lowered the bar so low that all they have to do is show up. Like, get to the rink without getting lost, and everybody's going to go, oh, look at that. At least they're trying hard this year. Like, they did a masterful PR job. In Vancouver, they took over here, Jim Benning. It's been 5 years, and they said, this isn't that long. We're going to be a contender in a couple of, like why put a time mark on yourself? Because when it didn't happen, people keep going back to those comments that Benning made, and you get stuck. Toronto's done a masterful PR job of really kind of saying nothing, like, really kind of lowering down what any expectation is. You bring up the young guys thing. That's not even a consideration anymore.
No.
And Detroit used to do it, right? When they were at their best, they'd draft somebody and they'd go, and Ken Holland's big line is, those guys need to marinate in the American League. And they'd pitch them off to Grand Rapids, and you'd never see the kid again for 3 years. And nobody ever asked. Like, they did it perfectly, and Toronto has done it perfectly here.
The only thing I would add, and they've done it perfectly as well, is they've used their resources. Like, not every organization can buy their way out of a jam. And that's not a shot at the organization, but when you are the richest organization in hockey, I guess Montreal will be right there too. Like, Robidas Island, we have some fun with that, but how many players just disappeared in about an 18-month period? And not a lot of organizations could do that. They have to wait out their bad contracts or wait out their scenarios. So that's why I continue to say Edmonton needs money too, or the owner has to write a check, because they've got to get rid of some dead weight there. And either if the owner says, I'm not infusing that money, then that cost them time. Where I think the Leafs had this amazing plan, but they were able to execute it because they had the resources behind them.
But they saw the philosophy too. You're not wrong in all that.
Right.
That's important. That was an important step. But imagine going to ownership and saying, "We're just gonna light on fire about $25 million and then be brutal."
Yeah.
So you gotta eat it.
Exactly.
You gotta listen to it, and then even once you get to this point,
that. Like you
have to. But even now, again with the Sandin point that I'm making. Like today, this would be one where I would think someone within the organization would be like, should we give him a shot? It's not even brought up.
No.
It's not even it's not going to happen.
The only thing, and it's a great point, Brian, would it be brought up if Freddie Anderson's just playing average and they're losing some games?
Well, no, I don't think so, because I think they've proven that they're committed to
But like
this
I think
type
I've only
of mentality.
read one article where his name came up. Like possibility of him possibly coming up.
I mean,
once,
you're
that's
right.
it,
Not
once.
force-feeding the young kids into the lineup. I get that, but I'm just saying the team has motored along. You said it earlier. They're on pace for their most points ever. They're loaded up front. The defense hasn't been a real focal point, even though two key guys are off of it. But Freddie's standing on his head. And that's what great goaltenders do, and they give you a chance. And Carey Price is doing it in Montreal. Vasilevsky to a lesser point because that team is, but he's been great this year. If the goaltender's just average and they're still giving up those chances, I think the defense or the way that they play would be a lot more under the microscope.
Yes,
it wouldn't bring up Sandin.
But it wouldn't be about one specific 18-year-old kid.
Correct. You're right, and that's a valid point. But I just think they would be in a different boat if Freddie's not playing that well.
Well, I have a tough time if I were to pick the MVP of the season right now. Like, would it be Marner? Would it be Tavares? Or I kind of find myself leaning even to Freddie Anderson. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's been amazing.
Yes.
This season. Like, just remember all those games where you're like, oh yeah, they won 5-2. Oh, Freddie made 41 saves, and he's not getting a bunch of muffins either. Noodles, back to the money that they used. Certain teams have an advantage, and you've got to be smart enough to find a way to use that advantage. Look at Tampa; they found a way to exploit their tax loophole or their tax advantage of no state tax, and as a result, they're able to get guys in. Like, there's no way Kucherov should be at 9.5.
No,
except he is, because that's an $11.5 million contract, roughly, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so they found a way to do the same thing. So if I'm in Vancouver here and you're looking about, man, it was a great 2-month run, but holy crap, we're nowhere near good enough. They've got to start using some of the finances they have, because they've got a wealthy owner here, and you've got to take a couple bad contracts if you have to. Start to look at the teams that are screwed cap wise and say, yeah, we'll take that crappy contract, but we'll take that young guy too.
Yep.
Like, there's ways to do it. But it takes, and I'll go back to this again, and not trying to fluff up the tires here, but the one thing that's impressed me the most in Toronto is that they had a plan and they've just not deviated from it. I can't imagine how hard it is not to say, oh, screw it, we need to go get this guy and we'll pay another first rounder or something like that, but they've not done it. And it's really in my mind been the key marker of what's gone on.